Welcome back here this morning. It's the story that everybody's talking about, plans for heading back to school. Joining me now is Patrice McCarthy, the director of the Connecticut Association of Boards of Education. Patrice, good morning. Thanks for being here.
Good morning. How are you?
Doing all right. You're the person to talk to. The governor announced a few days back that schools will be opening on a county-wide basis, saying that they'll be examining the numbers per county. What are your thoughts on that? What have you been hearing from faculty and staff and students about what they feel comfortable with?
Well, school boards, superintendents, teachers, and community members, which include obviously parents and students, have been looking at various reopening plans for several months now. And everyone has recognized that health and safety and the metrics around health and safety are going to be a primary consideration in terms of how school can reopen. It's also important because they've been looking at the variety of situations in our school buildings and the ability to implement the mitigation strategies that are so important to make sure that everyone in the building remains safe and healthy.
So just give me a bit of an outlook here, a summary on what you and your organization are looking at as far as metrics, what your messaging is right now when times are still a bit uncertain to staff and to faculty who reach out and to superintendents and Board of Ed members who obviously don't really know what's to come in the next couple of months. What does that messaging sound like?
Well, we have weekly phone calls with all of the board chairpersons around the state, as well as with the executive committee of our board of directors at CADE. And the clear message is the importance for flexibility and good communication. We all recognize that regardless of how school opens on day one, what teaching and learning looks like, that may have to change at some point during the school year. And so making sure that we realize that nothing is set in stone, that the strategies that are put in place as we learn new health information may need to be altered, and as we look at the practicalities of how things actually work in the operational sense, and making sure that we communicate that to the community, the parents, the students, as well as the staff. That's what's going to build the trust and the feeling of confidence that going back into the school setting, if the health metrics tell us that's possible, and if the physical capacity of the school allows for it, that will be a wonderful place for our students to be.
Well, Patrice, you and I both know that none of that can happen without resources. How are you guys doing as far as state resources and money from the state? I know I say that, and basically many of our viewers' minds go to taxpayer money. How are you guys doing on resources, and what do you guys still need?
Resources are very critical. Obviously, districts are grateful for the ability to acquire some new devices so that if they need to move to a hybrid learning model or a distance learning model, students have access to that. The issue of connectivity, being able to access a hotspot, for example, is also important. But it's also critical now more than ever that we ensure that there is equitable access to education for all of our students, no matter what the learning delivery system is going to be. So if it's an in-school experience, there is going to be the need for resources for probably additional staff, paraprofessionals, additional custodial staff, so that we make sure that those mitigation strategies can be successfully carried out. And either way, distance, a hybrid, or full in-school learning, the state and federal resources are critical because local boards of education, their budgets were set last spring, and they don't have any ability to raise additional tax revenue. So we really do need to depend upon the state and federal resources.
Patrice, you've been in this industry for quite a while now. Talk to me about, you mentioned Wi-Fi connectivity and remote learning, but there's that personal connectivity between teachers and students that students right now are missing out on. Talk to me about, first of all, the importance of that, but more importantly, the deficit that students can be experiencing if this remote learning continues for months and months.
That is a real challenge because even the most robust, effective distance learning program does not engage all of our students. And we saw that this past spring. Students who were very successful students in a classroom setting really struggled in the distance learning environment. And then we had significant numbers of students, particularly our students with the greatest needs, that were not engaged at all. So it's not just the technology and the connectivity, but there has to be structure and support. There have to be meaningful connections to teachers. And we have to be looking at the social and emotional needs of our students as well, because everyone has suffered from this era of uncertainty. In some cases, families have experienced significant trauma, and we need to make sure that we attend to those needs so that effective learning can actually take place.
Reflecting on some lessons learned here throughout this pandemic, obviously this has truly changed the scope of the way teachers teach, the way sometimes parents are teaching at home. If you look at a hybrid method of partial in-school instruction and then going home, from an education standpoint, how difficult is that for continuity to continue those lessons when you're changing where they're being taught?
There certainly are aspects of learning that can take place outside of the school setting. We see that when students are able to engage in outdoor learning experiences, certainly. Their technology, in some cases, also supports that learning outside of school. But students need the structure and the consistency and the contact with their educators. I think this has reminded everyone of the critical role that educators play in supporting our students.
Right now, there could be some parents watching, maybe some grandparents who are concerned about their kid going back in the fall, and they're still unsure. They've heard the governor's messages saying that, they're hoping to make an announcement soon. It depends on the district, the county. What's your message? You've, like I said, been around this industry for quite a while now. You've dealt with parents, a parent yourself, teachers, students. What would you say to them that are watching now that are feeling unsure?
School board members and superintendents have the health and welfare of their students as their primary concern. So parents and guardians, grandparents need to trust that these educational professionals are going to rely on the best medical advice that is available to them, both from the state level as well as their local health directors, and are working very hard to put in place the strategies that will allow a safe return in full to school. If families choose that option, they will have the option, even if there is full in-school instruction, to engage in distance learning, at least for a period of time, until overall the health metrics are very positive. But to remember that school board members are elected and they serve in this role as volunteers because they care about the well-being of students in their community. So that will always be paramount in their decision making.
Last point here, Patrice. What does that communication look like between school board members and your organization and then the state coming in, Commissioner Miguel Cardona giving some guidance? Just walk me through what that decision making looks like for a timeline. I think that's the biggest thing on all families' minds right now.
Well, today, the State Department of Education did actually release the health metrics that will be used, and it made it clear that this will essentially pick on a weekly basis of the spread, as well as consideration, which will be made at the local level, of the physical and operational ability of the school to make sure that they can implement the mitigation strategies. So it'll be both pieces of the metric. And I think that is going to have to be obviously evaluated on a weekly basis, because we know from the experience of other states that the prevalence of this virus can certainly change. And we will be very attentive to that. The good news is we have great communication with the Commissioner of Education, with the staff at the State Department of Education, as well as with school boards, superintendents, and principals around the state. So that communication is going to continue.
An ever-changing conversation and living with this pandemic as we do this via Skype is proof of that. Patrice, thanks so much for your time this morning. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, and thank you for joining us here on this Sunday morning. If you missed the real story, you can watch it anytime on fox61.com or on our Fox 61 YouTube page. Have a great rest of your day.